Hey guys, how you doing today? Too windy to do the walkabout today. Too windy. It's just really really bad today. So I'm in my little sheltered enclosure here by my place, and uh, it's a nice day, cold day, chilly day. I'm looking forward to the spring, man. I'm looking forward to the spring. I hope you are too. What are we talking about today? We are talking about Doug Ford, but honestly, a larger sense, the capitalist death cult's response to this COVID crisis, right? Especially as it evolves and we've gone into the third wave. Here in Ontario, Doug Ford is announcing another lockdown, right? Which these announcements for lockdowns are comedic. They're so small scale. They're so non effective, right? Like the reality is like every retailer and every restaurant is still having people get on the TTC, get on the transit, right? Go to work, mingle with their workers, mingle with those people, go home on the transit again, right? Like the fact that they're calling it a lockdown is a propaganda piece, right? It's if you want proof that there is such a thing as propaganda in your society, it's that they're calling these lockdowns. They're not lockdowns. Like, they're not lockdowns. They're restrictions, certainly, right? There's certainly restrictions on what can and cannot be done, but it's not like when I hear lockdown, I hear like everybody in your house, no movement, no nothing, right? We need to, like, if it suddenly started to rain fire, right? Like if there was suddenly acid falling from the skies, I would say we should go into lockdown. Everybody should stay in their homes, right? We should have a whole lot of precautionary measures in place. That's what I expect. But that's not what the Ford government has been doing, and that's what not a lot of capitalist governors and governments have been doing. And now we're getting into a point where the true death cult nature of capitalism is going to start rearing its ugly head, right? Like it's going to start to become more and more obvious and apparent to everyone that capitalism isn't just bungling this, because it obviously is bungling it. Like that's obvious. But it's not just bungling it, that it is actively pursuing a path of sacrificing human lives for profit, right? What is going to happen is that the capitalist societies who have access to the vaccines, right, they are going to hold on to the vaccine patents, right? They're not going to make these an open source sort of thing. They're not going to make these available to poorer nations so that poorer nations can manufacture their own. Nor are they going to lower the price of the vaccine to make it affordable for poorer nations, right? So what that means is that there are just going to be millions and millions and millions of people who cannot be vaccinated, who will not be vaccinated, and will perpetually, continuously spread this disease around. And why does this become dangerous and why does this become absurd is that COVID isn't like it's an evolving life form, right? It's not like it's not like a synthetic thing, right? Like we like to think like, oh, COVID's here and it's gonna go away eventually and all of that. But no, what it's going to do is it's going to mutate, right? It's going to mutate and change and create variants. And now you've got like the World Health Organization and you've got scientists around the world declaring loudly that if we don't get people vaccinated quickly, and if we don't get everybody vaccinated quickly, then these variants are going to render the vaccines moot. They're going to make it so that these vaccines are not viable. They don't work anymore. And frankly, I look at the situation and I look at what the capitalist death cult is doing, and I've come to see that they know, they recognize that, and they don't care, right? And in fact, that's actually part of their business model, right? Why would they want to sell a one-time vaccine that will solve the problem when they could sell this vaccine, and then sell the next vaccine, and then sell the next vaccine, and then sell the next vaccine, right? That it is in the interests of the death cult to keep this game going as long as possible. And eventually what will occur, because this is how capitalism operates, and this is what capitalism does, because it is a death cult, eventually one of these COVID variants are going to be exceptionally deadly, right? Like this last one that went through, people were very concerned because it was very contagious. That was the big concern, that this current strand is quite contagious. And so that really rang some alarm bells for people. But it isn't as deadly as something as, let's say, the Ebola virus, right? It's not like the bubonic plague or something like that. But if we keep messing around this way, right, we're just rolling the dice of fate every single time. Instead of buckling down, putting people into proper lockdown, getting a vaccine immediately, spreading that vaccine throughout the entire population of the world, right? Because we are a planetary species. The virus doesn't care about your borders, right? It doesn't care about your laws that you've written on paper or anything like that. And so if we dicker around with this, as we are obviously dickering around with it, then another variant is going to pop up and is going to cause massive problems for the world. And it's only a matter of time until one of these variants is actually extremely deadly, like as contagious as this is, or worse, and extraordinarily deadly. And our governors and our governance, the capitalist death cult, is not taking it seriously. They want to believe that, oh well, humanity will overcome. And the things that I'm hearing are essentially crypto-fascism, right? Like, are essentially just like a fascist position of just like, oh well, the strong will survive, right? That kind of idea. That, well, let's just open it up and people will get herd immunity and all. Oh yeah, sure, people will die, but that's fine. Like, this COVID crisis is really revealing in a very serious and very real way that we are part of a death cult that is completely willing to sacrifice human life. It views people with disabilities as weak. It views people with long-term care needs as disposable and weak. Like the checkpoint for whether or not you get to be part of the death cult society is, can you effectively sell yourself to the owners of the society? If you can, you get to live, right? You get food, you get shelter, you get to participate in the death cult. If you cannot, then you can go die. And that really is how Western capitalism has structured itself. And it forces people to act as parasites to the people who are around them, right? Like, people don't want to die, right? It forces people to parasticize themselves onto people and be a gigantic burden to the people who are around them, instead of the burden falling onto the society writ large, which is much easier for people to handle, which is much easier for a society to deal with, which is actually cheaper for a society to deal with, which actually leads to happier citizens. But the death cult doesn't want you to be happy, right? The death cult doesn't want you to be even content. The death cult doesn't want you to be safe, right? The death cult wants you scared, desperate, and isolated. They want you to be beholden to them, and they're completely disinterested in solving even a global life-threatening issue like COVID-19, right? That they are completely willing to endanger the lives of you and your family. Like, they're going to give you this vaccine, right? They're going to give you this vaccine while simultaneously knowing, like, yeah, this will be, in a year's time, this will be irrelevant, right? In a year's time, this vaccine will just be irrelevant because they're not giving it to everybody, right? They're withholding it from important nations. They're withholding it from large segments of the global population because they can't afford it, right? It's that simple. That capital, and we see in a full-scale way that capitalism is an exclusionary force. It will happily exclude people from the economy. It will drop them out of the economy. And we're beginning to see that there are extraordinary, dire implications to this. And so we're still going to be dealing with this COVID crisis in a year's time, right? Like, there's this narrative that's going around the world right now that, oh, well, the vaccine's coming out. In the summer, everybody should be, by summertime, everybody should be vaccinated, have their second string, and the populace will feel a lot better and all this kind of stuff. But, like, go to, like, Mali, go to, like, Ghana, right? They're not getting, go to these African nations that can't afford it. COVID's going to rip through those places. It's going to, and it's going to mutate, and it's going to change, and then it's going to reinfect the people who were previously vaccinated. And at this point, it's almost like that's the plan, right? It makes my conspiracy brain really, like, percolate, and lightning goes throughout, because it like just, because why would the death cultists want to cure this thing, right? They're not interested. Chris Rock has a really interesting, has a really good riff on this sort of thing. Like, they're not interested in curing diseases. They don't want to cure anything. They want to treat it, and they want the treatment to be as expensive as possible and take as long as possible. That's the death cult of capitalism. It's not interested in curing anything. And like, what is it going to take for us as a society to realize that we are living in a death cult, that these things are being intentionally done, or at least that the society has been structured to incentivize these sorts of behaviors, right? Like, that's the nice, soft centrist way of saying it, that, like, oh, the society has been structured so that, people make bad decisions for their personal gain, right? I go way farther than that. I think that these people are sociopaths. I think that they understand what they're doing. I think they get off on spreading misery. I think that they enjoy spreading misery. And I think that we are going to be still dealing with COVID-19 in a year's time, 2 years' time, 3 years' time, 4 years' time, because we're not actually doing what we need to do to actually eradicate this thing, right? Like, if you don't vaccinate the entire world's population, if you don't treat the entire world's population, if you don't give people access to the goods and the necessities that they need, right? This thing's just going to keep going around, and it's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse. So what's it going to take? What's it going to take before we realize that we're ruled by a death cult? Is it going to be like a literal plague? Like, are we going to need this thing to turn into a complete plague? I think the answer is yes, frankly. Okay, this is the end of this video, guys. If you've made it to this point, you have to like, you have to share, you have to subscribe, you have to. Those are the rules. Those are the rules. I don't make the rules. Those are the internet rules. You guys are doing really great out there, right? You live in a death cult that is attempting to destroy its own citizens, that has been attempting to destroy its own citizens for 50 years, that has structured itself to steal all of your time, steal all of your productivity, steal everything away from you, and give it to 10 people who jam it into offshore accounts. People like Jeff Bezos, who makes his employees piss in bottles and shit in boxes, right? Like, you're doing really wonderfully. They spend billions of dollars to gaslight you and to convince you that you're not doing well. But you are. You are doing well. I believe in you. I love you. Good luck. We're gonna need it.